This video will present topics of murder, violence, and death. It is thus unsuitable for all audience. Viewer discretion is advised.
Saint John Bosco, also called Giovanni Melchiorre Bosco, was born on August 16, 1815, in the hamlet of Besci, near Castelnuovo d'Asti, now Castelnuovo Don Bosco, in Piedmont, Italy. He was born into a humble peasant family, and his father, Francesco Bosco, passed away when John was only 2 years old, leaving his mother, Margherita Oceana Bosco, to raise him and his two brothers alone. Margherita played a crucial role in shaping John's faith, character, and compassion for the poor. From an early age, John exhibited remarkable intelligence, piety, and a deep love for helping others. Inspired by a mystical dream at the age of 9, in which he saw himself guiding unruly boys towards goodness through kindness rather than punishment, he felt called to devote his life to educating and evangelizing the youth. Despite financial hardships, John was determined to receive an education. He worked various jobs, including as a farmhold, tailor, and blacksmith, while pursuing his studies. With the help of kind benefactors, he entered a seminary at Chieri in 1835 and was ordained a priest on June 5, 1841. From then on, he was known as Don Bosco, an Italian term for Father Bosco. After his ordination, Don Bosco moved to Turin, where he was deeply troubled by the plight of the homeless and impoverished boys. Many were orphaned street children or juvenile delinquents caught in crimes and exploitation. Moved by compassion, he began gathering these boys, offering them religious instruction, education, and a sense of belonging. In 1846, Don Bosco established his first oratory, a youth center in Valdocco, Turin. This became a haven for abandoned boys, where they received shelter, food, and education, as well as spiritual guidance. His unique preventative system of education was based on reason, religion, and loving kindness, which avoided harsh discipline in favor of encouragement and trust. He provided vocational training in trades such as printing, shoemaking, tailoring, and mechanics, preparing boys for productive futures. Recognizing the need for a permanent organization to continue his mission, Don Bosco founded the Society of St. Francis de Sales, the Salesians, in 1859. The Salesians were dedicated to youth education, particularly for the poor, under the patronage of Saint Francis de Sales, known for his gentleness and zeal. In 1872, he co-founded the Salesian Sisters, officially known as the Daughters of Mary Help of Christians, with Saint Maria Domenica Mazzarello to serve young girls in need. The Salesians' mission expanded rapidly, reaching France, Spain, Argentina, Brazil, and beyond. Don Bosco was widely regarded as a miracle worker. Numerous accounts describe his prophetic dreams, healings, and even instances where food miraculously multiplied to feed the hungry boys in his care. He had an extraordinary devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary, particularly under the title of Mary Help of Christians. As his health declined, Don Bosco continued his mission tirelessly, traveling and writing extensively. By the time of his passing on January 31st, 1888, the Salesians had grown into a worldwide congregation with hundreds of priests and religious dedicated to youth. He was beatified on June 2nd, 1929, and canonized as a saint on April 1st, 1934, by Pope Pius XI. His feast day is celebrated on January 31st. Saint John Bosco remains one of the greatest educators and youth mentors in church history. Today, the Salesian family includes priests, brothers, nuns, and lay cooperators that continues his mission in over 130 countries, running schools, oratories, missions, and shelters for disadvantaged youth. His educational philosophy, often summarized as an education in matters of the heart, continues to inspire educators and youth workers worldwide. St. John Bosco is the patron saint of youth, school children, apprentices, editors, and publishers. Some famous sayings of Don Bosco include run, jump, shout, but do not sin. The school was not enough to form good Christians and honest citizens. There was a need for a home, a church, a playground. Without confidence and love, there can be no true education. And finally, do what you can, and God will do the rest. The iconography of St. John Bosco, otherwise known as Don Bosco, is rich with symbolism, reflecting his role as a priest, educator, and protector of youth. Artistic depictions emphasize his gentleness, fatherly presence, and deep faith, often portraying him in dynamic settings surrounded by children. His attributes, gestures, and accompanying symbols all reinforce his legacy as the apostle of youth. Don Bosco is almost always depicted wearing a black cassock, signifying his priestly identity. Occasionally, he may be shown with a biretta, a traditional priest cap, though this is less common. In more modern portrayals, he may be seen wearing a cloak or berreado, evoking his simple yet dignified approach to his mission. He is usually portrayed with a kind, smiling, yet deeply thoughtful face, reflecting his love for youth. His short, wavy, and high forehead are common artistic markers. Some portraits accentuate his eyes, which are said to have been filled with warmth and wisdom, reflecting his deep concern for young souls. He's also frequently depicted raising his hands in blessing or pointing towards the heavens, symbolizing his role as a spiritual guide. He's often as well shown extending his arm towards youth. This illustrates his constant outreach to the youth and welcoming them with care. He may be also shown holding a book or quill, which represents his contributions to education and the many works he authored to instruct the youth. One of the most defining elements in Don Bosco's iconography is the presence of children, often dressed as apprentices or schoolboys, gathered around him. Some artworks depict orphans or street children, emphasizing his mission to rescue abandoned youth. He is sometimes shown placing his hand on a boy's shoulder, reinforcing his role as a fatherly protector. In some depictions, A statue or imagery of the Virgin Mary stands in the background, or is being pointed to by Don Bosco, reflecting his Marian devotion and the Salesian motto, to Jesus through Mary. Some artworks also feature him kneeling before a vision of Mary, illustrating his mystical dream that guided him to his mission. A wolf or bear turned docile at his feet symbolize his ability to tame unruly souls through kindness, referencing his dream in which he turned wild boars into lamb is another common depiction in his iconography. In some depictions, Don Bosco holds the Salesian rulebook, symbolizing the foundation of the Salesian order and his legacy in guiding future generations. A scroll bearing the phrase "Da mihi animas, saterae tole," give me souls, take away the rest, may appear representing his passionate zeal for saving souls. In some images, they show Don Bosco holding a chalice or a host, emphasizing his deep Eucharist devotion and his work to lead young people to Christ through the sacraments. He may be sometimes depicted celebrating Mass with young boys and assisting them, illustrating his role as their spiritual father. Some examples of the iconography include the Don Bosco the Boys by Phillips Richard Morris, made in 1880s. This oil painting portrays Don Bosco standing amidst a group of young apprentices dressed in work clothes, reflecting his emphasis on vocational training. The soft lighting and color palettes enhance the sense of fatherly care and devotion. Another example is the Vision of Don Bosco, made by Giovanni Crida in the 20th century. This work captures one of Don Bosco's prophetic dreams, where he sees a stormy sea with a great ship, which is symbolized of the church, guided by two pillars, the Eucharist and the Virgin Mary. This is a dramatic Baroque style composition which reinforces his mystical experiences and trust in divine guidance. A third example is stained glass windows in the Basilica of Mary Help of Christians in Turin, Italy. These windows depict Don Bosco preaching to children, often pointing towards heaven or to a Marian image. The vibrant colors and Gothic-inspired designs highlight his role as a spiritual light for youth. Another example is the bronze statue of the Salesian Oratory in Valdoco, Turin. This famous statue shows Don Bosco walking with two young boys, one holding a book and the other holding a tool, symbolizing the harmony of spiritual and practical education. The flowing motion of the sculpture suggests movement, reinforcing his active missionary spirit. Finally, there's the example of the Dream of the Two Columns, which are murals in the Salesian churches worldwide. This is a recurrent mission in the Salesian houses, portrays Don Bosco's dream in which the church is saved by devotion to the Eucharist and Mary Help of Christians. The intense contrast of light and dark emphasize the prophetic role. There are, of course, many variations of his iconography in different artistic traditions. The Italian and European depictions tend to emphasize realism, focusing on his humble yet dignified presence. They commonly feature soft light and warm tones to evoke a sense of warmth and fatherly love. In Latin America and Filipino iconography, they depict Don Bosco in brighter, more vibrant colors, emphasizing his missionary work in Latin America. Some images feature native children, reflecting his universal mission. While in the Byzantine iconography or Eastern Catholic influence, some of these Eastern Catholic depictions show Don Bosco in traditional iconography style with gold backgrounds, elongated features, and rich symbolism. The halo is, of course, a prominent feature, emphasizing his saintly status. Some of the more uncommon depictions of Don Bosco includes the devil. This is a rare but striking image that shows Don Bosco casting out demons or wrestling with a shadowy figure, symbolizing his battles against sin and his belief in the reality of spiritual warfare. Another rare iconography feature is Don Bosco and Saint Dominic Savio. Some depictions show Don Bosco with Saint Dominic Savio, his most famous student, who became the youngest non-martyr saint. This reinforces his role in forming holy youth and guiding them to sainthood. In summary, the iconography of Saint John Bosco is rich, diverse, and deeply meaning, reflecting his missionary zeal, fatherly love, and educational legacy. Whether depicted in classic oil paintings, modern stained glass, or Byzantine-inspired icon, his image remains a powerful reminder of his lifelong dedication to youth and his unwavering faith in God's providence. Saint John Bosco, born in 1815 and passed away in 1888, was renowned not only for his educational work and pastoral mission, but also for his extraordinary miracles attributed to him during his lifetime and after his passing. These miracles can be categorized into prophetic dreams, physical healing, multiplication of food, supernatural intervention, and exorcisms. Don Bosco experienced over 150 prophetic dreams, which guided his mission and often revealed future events, the spiritual states of soul, and heavenly messages. One example is the Dream of Two Columns in 1862. Don Bosco saw a stormy sea with a great ship, otherwise known as the church, under attack from enemies. The ship was safely guided into two great columns. One represented the Eucharist and the other the Virgin Mary. This foreshadowed the challenges of facing the church and the importance of devotion to the Mary and the Eucharist for spiritual protection. Another example is the souls in heaven, purgatory, and hell. In a terrifying vision, Don Bosco was led by angels to purgatory and hell, where he saw young men suffering due to their sins. One of his students, whom he had previously warned, appeared in torment, confirming the prophetic nature of Don Bosco's vision. This dream profoundly impacted the way he guided his students towards holiness. Finally, there were miracles of death predictions. He accurately predicted the death of several of his students, including Saint Domenico Savio, who passed away at 14. In one case, he was told the names Charles to prepare for death. The boy passed away unexpectedly just a few days later. When it comes to the miracles of physical healing, there are many examples, one of which is the healing of Charles in 1856. A young boy, Charles suffered from a fatal lung disease. His mother brought him to Don Bosco, who blessed him and instructed him to pray to Mary, help of Christians. The boy was completely healed overnight, astonishing doctors. Another example is the cure of a blind girl in Turin. A young girl who was blind was brought to Don Bosco. After he made the sign of the cross over her eyes and prayed, her sight was restored instantaneously. A third example is the healing of a crippled boy. A child who had been paralyzed since birth was carried to Don Bosco's oratory. After the blessing of the child and urging him to pray, the boy stood up and walked for the first time. Finally, there was the resurrection of a young man in 1854. A dying boy named John was at his deathbed. His mother begged Don Bosco to intervene. Don Bosco prayed fervently, placed his hands on the boy's head, and commanded him to rise in the name of God. The boy immediately revived, fully healthy. As for the miracles of the multiplication of food, there are three examples. The first is the miraculous loaves in 1849. One day, Don Bosco only had a few loaves of bread to feed hundreds of hungry students. He prayed and prayed and blessed the loaves, and as he distributed them, the bread never ran out, feeding everyone present. A second example is the multiplication of chestnuts in 1857. During a winter feast, Don Bosco's oratory had only a small basket of roasted chestnuts to share for over 600 boys. He prayed over the basket and began distributing them. The chestnuts miraculously multiplied, ensuring that every boy received a full serving. The third example This third example is the unending communion hosts in 1860s. Sorry, my mic cut out, so if I repeated, I apologize. On several occasions, Don Bosco's supply of consecrated hosts miraculously never ran out during Mass, despite having far more communicants than expected. As for supernatural interventions and protection, here are three examples of this miraculous events. The mysterious dog Grigio. A large gray dog named Grigio appeared whenever Don Bosco was in danger. On multiple occasions, assassins tried to unalive him, but the dog would suddenly appear, growling fiercely, and scared them away. Grigio would disappear mysteriously after protecting Don Bosco, leading many to believe the dog was an angel in disguise. The second miraculous event is the protection from assassins from 1852 to 1860s. Due to political unrest, enemies of the church attempted to unalive Don Bosco multiple times. In one such instance, a gunman aimed at him, but the gun miraculously jammed. Another time he was attacked, but his clothes remained untouched, as if protected him by an unseen force. The third example is the thunderstorm at the oratory in 1873. A violent storm threatened to destroy the oratory, But Don Bosco raised his hands in prayer and the storm suddenly ceased. There are, of course, many examples of miracles of exorcism and deliverance from evil. The possessed boy in Turin in 1865 is one example of this. A boy plagued by demonic afflictions was brought to Don Bosco. The child screamed in supernatural voices, convulsed violently, and tried to flee. However, Don Bosco commanded the demon to leave in the name of Jesus and sprinkled holy water over the boy. The boy was instantly freed from the possession. Another example is the haunted house in Lanzo. A noble family asked Don Bosco to investigate a house where strange noises, apparitions, and disturbances occurred. He blessed the house, prayed, and commanded any spirits to depart. The hauntings ceased immediately. A final example is the girl freed from a curse. There was a young girl unable to speak or move due to a mysterious affliction who was brought to Don Bosco. He discerned that an evil curse was placed upon her. After blessing her with holy water and praying to Mary for help, she was completely restored back to normal. There were, of course, many posthumous miracles and as well as his canonization. Even after his passing in 1888, Don Bosco's intercession led to numerous documented miracles, particularly healings. One example is the healing of Teresa Morando in 1929. Teresa, a woman who was paralyzed for years, prayed to Don Bosco. One night she dreamed of him smiling at her. When she woke up, she was completely cured. A second example is the miracle of Maria Buzzetti in 1928. Maria was a terminally ill woman and was given no hope of survival. Her family placed a relic of Don Bosco on her chest, and within hours she was fully healed. A final example is the healing of Don Giuseppe Quadrio in 1949. He was a young Salesian priest who was dying of tuberculosis. After intense prayers to Don Bosco, he made a sudden, inexplicable recovery, shocking doctors. In summary, St. John Bosco's miracles, ranging from healings and exorcisms to prophetic dreams and divine protection, demonstrate his deep connection with God. His legacy lives through the Salesian order, Marian devotion, and countless miracles attributed to his intercession, even today. St. John Bosco followed a rigorous and methodical process within the Catholic Church, required extensive investigation into his life, virtues, and miracles. His path to sainthood involved multiple phases, accumulated in his canonization by Pope Pius XI on April 1st, 1934. Here's a brief but exhaustive account of the canonical procedure. After Don Bosco's passing on January 31st, 1888, the church imposed the traditional 5-year waiting period before opening his cause. However, widespread veneration arose immediately among his followers, particularly the Salesian congregation and young people. Reports of miraculous healings and supernatural favors linked to his intercession surfaced soon after his passing. In 1890, calls for his canonization intensified, leading to the Salesians to begin gathering testimonials and documentary evidence. On July 21st, 1907, Pope Pius X officially introduced the cause, granting Don Bosco the title of Servant of God. This marked the first formal step in recognizing his heroic virtue and sanctity. From 1907 to 1914, a tribunal was established in Turin, the city where Bosco, where uh, Don Bosco lived and worked. The church examined his writings, sermons, and actions for orthodoxy and theological soundness. More than 900 witnesses were interviewed, including his closest collaborators and students. The next step was the examination of the heroic virtues from 1914 to 1929. The Vatican's Congregation for Causes of Saints meticulously studied Don Bosco's virtues, assessing his faith, hope, charity, prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance. Pope Benedict XV and later Pope Pius XI personally supported his cause, recognizing his outstanding dedication to youth and the church. On June 2nd, 1929, Pope Pius XI declared Don Bosco venerable, affirming that he had lived a life of heroic virtues. Before beatification, of course, there were two miracles that needed to be attributed to Don Bosco's intercession, which had to be scientifically and theologically verified. The church's medical board investigated these cases. The first was Teresa Morando in 1929, who was a young woman who was suffering from an incurable disease who was instantaneously healed after praying to Don Bosco. The second example was Maria Buzetti in 1928, a young girl on the verge of passing miraculously recovered after her family placed Don Bosco's relic on her. Both these cases were medically inexplicable, leading to Vatican's approval. On June 2nd, 1929, there was the beatification by Pope Pius XI of Don Bosco. After confirming his heroic virtues and the two miracles being recognized, Don Bosco was formally beatified in a solemn ceremony in St. Peter's Basilica. He was then given the title of Blessed John Bosco, allowing public veneration in specific regions. His beatification was celebrated worldwide, however, particularly in Salesian communities. The final step, which was canonization, required additional miracles as well as the final approval by the Vatican itself. This occurred from 1929 to 1933. For formal canonization, two more miracles had to be rigorously examined and authenticated. The Vatican's theologians, doctors, and cardinals scrutinized the following cases: the healing of Giuseppe Quadrio in the 1930s. This was a young Salesian priest suffering from advanced tuberculosis who made an unexpected but complete recovery. The other example was the instantaneous cure of Sister Mary Eulalia in 1931, a nun who was diagnosed with a terminal condition who was healed after invoking Don Bosco. Both cases met the strict Vatican criteria. They were instantaneous, permanent, and scientifically inexplicable. As for the Congregation for the Causes of Saints, it conducted a final review, ensuring that Don Bosco's life and works conformed entirely to Catholic doctrine. On March 19th, 1934, Pope Pius XI signed a decree of canonization, affirming that Don Bosco was worthy of being declared a saint. St. Peter's Basilica in Vatican City hosted a grand celebration attended by thousands of pilgrims, including many young people and saints, on April 1st, 1934. Pope Pius XI officially proclaimed Don Bosco as a saint, declaring the following: St. John Bosco was a father and teacher of youth, a model of educators, and a guide of souls. December coincided with the Jubilee year of redemption, highlighting Don Bosco's role in the spiritual renewal of the youth. Some important notes: post canonization recognition and influence. Don Bosco's feast day was set on January 31st, the date of his passing. He was named patron of apprentices, young people, Catholic publishers, due to his dedication to education, vocational training, and religious literature. Many successive popes praised Don Bosco's legacy. Pope Pius XII called him a model for all priests. Pope John Paul II reaffirmed his role as protector of youth, whilst Pope Francis encouraged Salesians to continue Don Bosco's mission of mercy and education. After his canonization, the Salesian order expanded dramatically, spreading Don Bosco's educational methods and spirituality to over 130 countries. Many churches, schools, and missions were dedicated in his name, particularly Italy, Latin America, and the Philippines. In summary, the canonization of St. Bosco was a lengthy, thorough, and deeply scrutinized process, reflecting the Church's commitment to recognizing only authentic holiness and divine intervention. His path from servant of God to saint involved meticulous investigations, the verification of multiple miracles, and worldwide devotion. Today, Don Bosco remains one of the most beloved and venerated saints, especially among youth, educators, and the Salesian family. His legacy continues through schools, missions, and works of charity worldwide.